Welcome to the Retirement Compass radio show. I'm Mike Bauer and joined today by Jeff Gove, co-founder, financial advisor of Stonebridge Wealth Systems, serving families all over Nebraska, Kearney, Lincoln, Grand Island, and Omaha. That's where their physical offices are. You can always set up a complimentary visit with them. No cost, no obligation when you call 866-295-5146. Leave your checkbooks at home. You're going to sit down, have a conversation, just a quick visit with the team at 866-295-5146. You can always reach them online at stonebridgeiwm.com. Jeff, thanks so much for jumping on today, man. Looking forward to today's show.
Yeah, it should be good.
All right. Well, we're going to start off talking about mom and dad. All right. We're going to start talking about, about your parents, whatever that situation looked like for anybody growing up. You probably had a picture in your head. You worked for one company, you collected a pension, signed up for Social Security, boom, you're retired, enjoy the good life. Mm-hmm. But that model, yeah, I heard you chuckle there, Jeff. That model is gone. I want to talk about what changed, why it matters, and why a modern retirement plan is so important. So let's start things off with a big question. How different is today's retirement landscape from what it looked like just one generation ago?
Yeah, many of those people working back then, they were getting a pension. So it was kind of like, if you think about the employer's commitment to their employees, like they were very committed. They're putting money away for their employees' retirement that's going to pay them once they retire. So now that's kind of changed, where they went from a pension to the 401k. 401k is still a great thing, but it shifts that responsibility or that commitment from the employer to the employee. So now you got to put the money in. Now, most employers, they match. So if you put in 6%, maybe you get 4%, or you put in 5%, you get 5%, whatever the match is for your company. So there is still some commitment there from the employer, but there's some personal responsibility there too, where you've got to fund your own retirement. What's happened is, the employer was committed to the employee, so the employee was committed back. Once that shifted, a lot of people change jobs a lot because, like I said, most employers match on their 401k. So it's not something that's keeping you there, keeping you at that one employer for your whole working career. People are moving around. Maybe it's better benefits, or it's better pay, or better work environment. I think a lot of people dealt with some not very fun work environments, probably just because they had that pension. Again, the employer was committed to them and to their retirement. So that's changed quite a bit over the years.
So, Jeff, sometimes my job, I feel like, is to ask the dumb questions. And to me, I want to ask this question, but I also feel like it might be a little bit dumb. But because so many people now don't have a pension, there's probably a lot of people that's a foreign concept to them. And the pension really was the centerpiece of that model that you were just talking about. What did the pension actually provide for many people just one generation ago that only a handful have now?
Yeah, so a pension is essentially providing a guaranteed income stream, and you had different options. You could do, a 10-year certain, which means they'll pay you for 10 years after you retire once you turn it on. There's life, so they'll pay you for the rest of your life as long as you live. Now, if you die, it ends. There's nothing left over. You could do joint and survivor, so it'd be for the life of the employee and their spouse for as long as both of them live. So that was really nice. The nice thing now is you can still acquire a pension. So you could still set that up for yourself. And if you're married, you could set it up for the husband and wife, but you have to fund it. So if you had, let's say you had $1 million saved for retirement and you needed, $20,000 a year to live on, you could put, let's say you could put 300,000 of that million into an investment vehicle that would then spin off $20,000 a year in income for the rest of your life. So that's an option today, and you can do that joint. The other benefit of that this is an index annuity is what I'm talking about. The benefit of that is, compared to the old pensions, is if you die and you haven't taken all your money out, there's still money left over. Typically, it's a lump sum death benefit to your beneficiaries. So you kind of get to have your cake and eat it too. where it's, $20,000 a year, there's $150,000 left over when you're both gone, that goes to your beneficiaries. Where the pension, again, you both pass away, that income stream stops.
Yeah, I mean, and like I said, I kind of feel like it's a dumb question, but I mean, for a lot of people listening, younger generations, they're like, a pension is a foreign word to them. It's Greek to them. For anybody just joining us, we're talking about why the retirement plan your parents followed, it just doesn't work the same way anymore. There's no pension. And to be quite honest, Jeff, there's a lot more debt nowadays. I think there's, and healthcare costs. I mean, my goodness. And the key thing to remember, it's really not about panic. It's about updating the plan to match reality. And as Jeff said, you can create your own pension. The team at Stonebridge has a variety of different ways for you to do that and create that pension that your folks and their folks had for so many years in their retirement. And you can begin that process today at stonebridgeiwm.com or just give them a call, set up a meeting, set up a visit. It's just a conversation at any one of their locations in Kearney, Omaha, Grand Island, or Lincoln at 866-295-5146. That's 866-295-5146. So I'm sure for many folks, they've got the idea that Social Security was going to be the foundation of retirement income. Is that another story of yesteryear as well, Jeff?
It's getting there. I don't know that it's there today where it's going to go away. If you're retiring in, 2 years or something like that. I don't know I don't have the crystal ball, unfortunately, that says this is what's going to happen with Social Security. But what I do know is, over the years, they put more and more responsibility on the individual, right? We used to have a pension. So that, like I said, the employer would fund your retirement essentially. And then they created the 401k, so shifting that to the individual. Then we had Social Security. Well, if there's not enough money in Social Security, the problem is there's not enough workers to fund it, right? So I think back when it started, I can't remember the exact numbers, but I think it was like 30 workers for every recipient. Now I think it's three workers for every recipient. So if you're getting $3,000 a month in Social Security, those three that are working for you, they better be making a pretty good income to pay that much in. So that's a huge weight on the system. We just don't have as much, that baby boomer generation is huge, and there's not enough workers coming up to fulfill that. But yeah, so like I said, more responsibilities being shifted to the individual. What that means is you need to save for your own retirement. If you need to be saving at least 15% of your paycheck for your future. And, retirement is honestly kind of a newer deal with these pensions of the past. Historically, they're fairly new. But if you have the desire to retire someday, you're going to need to save and fund your own retirement. The other thing is the day could come where you can't work. So for, some of my farmer listeners that, they farm forever, the day will come, or probably, that you can't farm anymore or that you can't go to work anymore. So we need to have a plan.
And Jeff, we've talked about this in the past in terms of the fact that, especially for the ag families that you work with, and there's so many of them out there where, hey, that work week that is 24/7, all of a sudden now actually it doesn't disappear overnight, but it goes down to a 40-hour work week. Or, hey, my body can only handle 20. And I want to talk about that in terms of health as well, because not just farmers, but everybody. Healthcare, the costs are, we talk about inflation all the time just as a broad term, but the inflation when it comes to healthcare, and also the fact that combined with the fact that people are living longer, is an increased burden on retirees as well, I'm sure.
Yeah, it's a huge expense. We talk about the biggest expenses in retirement are taxes and healthcare. I had a gal in my office, and unfortunately her father is going to a memory care facility, and she's looking at $11,000 a month.
Oh my gosh.
So, it's very expensive. Wow. That can crack that nest egg rather quickly. So, and even on the insurance side, most people don't want to pay enough in premium to cover $11,000 a month. So typically when people buy long-term care insurance, which is what is going to cover that, they're transferring some of the risk to the insurance company. We're not covering $11,000 because you're still going to have, if you've saved for retirement, you have some assets that could hopefully produce some income for you to cover that expense. You have Social Security. You have other things that can help supplement that. But I want to transfer a bulk of that to the insurance company because, like I said, it's very expensive and it's not growing at 3% a year either. The healthcare inflation is significant. So it's really, really important to have a plan for long-term care.
And when you mentioned that, healthcare and long-term care, they for a lot of people, they're grouped together, but those are two very different expenses that, you mentioned $11,000 a month. My goodness, that is definitely something that anybody out there, if that's the situation that happens, unfortunately, in retirement, that's something that you want to plan for now rather than later. And you can do that with the team at Stonebridge Wealth Systems, 866-295-5146. That number again is 866-295-5146. StonebridgeIWM.com is the website as well. Schedule a complimentary review of where your plan stands today, especially if it's built on those outdated ideas of how retirement used to be, maybe how retirement, and sometimes this is another swear word, should be. That's not the way it is. And the team with Stonebridge can help you deal with everything for you in terms of the way things actually are today. Give them a call, 866-295-5146.
Did you ever think your retirement would be shared with our government? It's true. Your traditional 401k, IRA, pension, or similar retirement accounts are like a partnership with the IRS. Simply put, they want their tax dollars, and you have them. With our latest tax calculator, you can plug in your own numbers while sitting at home. To find out what your future tax liability could be, scan the QR code or go to stonebridgetaxbill.com.
Welcome back to the Retirement Compass Radio Show. I'm Mike Bauer, joined today by Jeff Gove, co-founder and financial advisor, and Tim Kulhanek, co-founder and financial advisor of Stonebridge Wealth Systems, conveniently located all over Nebraska, Kearney, Lincoln, Grand Island, and Omaha. And gentlemen, let's jump in and let's break down some real tactics that really wealthy family use to manage their money. It's probably a level above what most financial planning relationships exist at. Most people probably don't even know exists. There's this thing called the family office, and essentially it's a private team that ultra high net worth families set up to coordinate investments and taxes and estate planning and insurance and so on and so forth. And let's talk about some of the tactics that are used there, things that we can learn from the obscenely wealthy and apply them to our lives. So Jeff, we'll start off. Let me ask you, what separates how obscenely wealthy families think about money versus, the rest of us?
Well, I think, it's number one, it's the people they surround themselves with. Like you just mentioned, the family office, having someone handle all of their financial affairs, to make sure that you're efficient from a tax perspective, from a legacy perspective. If you have a high net worth, making sure that, your kids don't pay too much in taxes or more in taxes than they need to when you're gone. Trying to keep that wealth intact, instead of blowing through it. A lot of different things, but a lot of those things, you don't have to have an ultra high net worth, to implement some of the things that they're doing. Some things as simple as making sure if you have a Roth IRA and a traditional IRA and a brokerage account, you have several different account types, making sure that we're being efficient there and that we're funding the right account, that we have the right assets in the right account, that we're not trying to grow. If we have a more growth oriented piece of our strategy or our portfolio, that's not in your traditional IRA, it's in your Roth IRA. All of these little things, simple things, make a huge difference in the overall portfolio.
And you talked about efficiency, and I want to ask you, Tim, about efficiency because, family offices having this team, oversee all of your financial, decisions in life obviously helps out with efficiency. But what's something that we can learn about? One of the things that I'm sure that they do, which is make sure that things are taken out in the right sequence in terms of retirement. Withdrawal sequencing, at a tactical level, how does that work, and what can we learn from this family office that most of us probably don't have?
A lot of people just use what's called the standard withdrawal sequence. They assume I'll tap into my taxable bucket first, then my tax deferred, and I'll save the tax free for later. Which, I guess, if you just want to use a rule of thumb or TikTok for your financial plan, that's one way to go. The difference, I think, between that and a family office is the family office isn't looking at what's right in front of them, just the tip of their nose. When you think about how companies plan, like big multinational corporations, they don't plan based off what they think is going to happen in the next month, 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, 18 months. It's forward looking. So if they're going to decide whether or not they're going to buy or lease a piece of equipment, they're going to look at the useful life and do some sort of discounted cash flow analysis and figure out, does it make sense for us to own this thing, or should we just borrow it, so to speak? But the useful life, this could be multiple years, it could be decades for some of this equipment. And so the family office works a lot more like the finance department of a big corporation, in that it's a team, so like we have a team here at Stonebridge of multiple advisors. Usually if you have a meeting with us, there's going to be more than one advisor in the meeting, because there's a lot of things that really need to be different aspects of your plan that need to be analyzed versus just doing financial product sales, which is why, a lot of places are just a one-man shop, because if all you're getting is a mutual fund, a life insurance policy, an annuity, and some ETFs, without any tactical strategy on how it's all supposed to work together to coordinate income, investment, tax, healthcare, and legacy, you probably don't need really that more team approach. But when you're thinking about that, go ahead.
No, I was just going to jump in. I thought you were done.
But when you think about that sequence of withdrawal, sometimes it makes sense to use that standard approach, taxable, tax deferred, tax free. But there's other times a blended approach can make more sense. And in the software we use, that's what I was pulling up here, Mike, is we use Right Capital is what it's called. And there's a lot of different variations of what Right Capital can do for folks. But we can actually test this. We can model and adjust to see what makes the most sense for you. So we can go to our tax planning tab, so to speak, and we can say, does it make sense to use that standard withdrawal? Or maybe there's some other tax strategies that would actually add more value to our overall plan. And so when I'm in here, I can say I could do like a pro rata type approach where we take a little bit out of each one. We could flip it and do tax deferred first. We could do tax free first. Let me give you real world applications real quick, because I think examples help folks conceptualize this, especially if they're driving down the road and listening to this. Let's say that somebody needs to withdraw $50,000. Okay. Well, if the majority of their money is tax deferred, they might not have $50,000 in the emergency fund. So we might be tapping in a good portion of this into that tax deferred bucket. The problem is, if they need 50 of tax deferred dollars, can they withdraw 50? No, they can't, because they're going to have a tax bill. So they might have to take, $65,000 or $64,000 or $63,000, whatever it ends up being, it's more. Well, when I'm doing planning with a family, I'm looking at, okay, what are the downstream effects? So if I take this $63,000, how much additional Social Security is going to be taxable? How much of a capital gain that was taxed at zero is now going to get pushed in the 15% tax bracket? How much of their income is now going to be phased out for a portion of the One Big Beautiful Bill Act temporary 65 plus additional senior deduction? How much is now going to be pushed into an environment maybe where there's net investment income tax, which would be this additional ACA Obamacare type tax? And how much is now going to be subject to an income-related monthly adjustment amount, because now they went over by 1 penny of the first IRMA tier, and now they're going to pay more for Medicare. Well, just using a rule of thumb, because gosh darn it, this is the way that we're told to do it, doesn't make any sense. You have to be able to adapt to the environment you're in. And so when I look at a situation like that, I might say, look, folks, we'll take like $30,000 or $40,000 of the tax deferred bucket, but we're taking the rest from somewhere else. Whether that's the taxable bucket because they have some savings, and I say, we'll replenish that bucket next year after the first of the year. So are all of those levels reset, and we don't have that same IRMA, provisional income, capital gain type of kind of cliff that we're being pushed up against. Or maybe we even tap into Roth if that's what makes the most sense. But those little things matter, because, small inefficiencies compound over time. And if you're not paying attention to the little things, I think a president said, a small hole sink a great ship or something like that, right?
I think I have heard that, and sure, let's attribute it to a president. Maybe I'll Google it later and we'll find out exactly. But for anybody who's just jumping in the car, we're talking about the tactics that wealthy families use, whether it's tax location. Tim was just talking about withdrawal sequencing and making sure that you're taking into account, as he said, the downstream effects of every action that you're taking from a financial standpoint. None of these approaches require millions and millions of dollars. They just require somebody like the team at Stonebridge Wealth Systems coordinating the whole picture. That's exactly what they do for families all across Nebraska. And you can reach them, set up that complimentary first visit, 866-295-5146. Have your calendar ready because you're going to get right on their calendar at 866-295-5146. Offices in Omaha, Grand Island, Lincoln, and Kearney. And they're always online at stonebridgeiwm.com. All right, so Jeff, when we talk about different elements of retirement, life insurance is one of them, and family offices or the extremely wealthy often use life insurance in a different way than we generally think of it. How does that work out for families that use that as kind of as a different option than the way that most people are probably thinking right now?
Yeah, a lot of people that we meet with, life insurance is kind of a dirty word. It's like it covers the, income replacement, for example. So while I'm working, we haven't saved well yet. It's a tool that would, if something happened prematurely, you'd pass away early. It's going to cover those expenses. But I just read a book on the Rockefellers, and it was comparing the Rockefellers to the Vanderbilts. So two very wealthy families historically. The Vanderbilts today, they don't have a ton of money. It's still a big name, but they spent all of their wealth. The Rockefellers, they utilized things like life insurance in a smart way. Real quickly, they essentially have a trust set up for their family. When a new baby is born, they buy life insurance on that. The trust buys life insurance on that baby. When that child, or hopefully adult, eventually passes away, that goes back and replenishes everything that individual took out of the trust over time. So they're utilizing that to utilizing life insurance to replace all the income that was taken out. When they borrow money, they borrow from the trust. So, there's a system that was put in place that's allowed them to preserve all of that wealth compared to, again, to the Vanderbilts, that it was more, we're going to spend. Everybody get a job. We'll take money out of the trust, and they've essentially depleted it.
That's really interesting. Using life insurance as kind of a long-term wealth transfer. For anybody just tuning in, during this segment, we've gone over some of the tactics wealthy families can use to manage taxes, liquidity, sequencing in the right order. And that's an interesting angle as well. Long-term wealth transfer, using a life insurance policy as a way to do that, to create and continue generational wealth. If you'd like the team at Stonebridge Wealth Systems to take a look at your accounts, and maybe through the same lens that they would look at the Rockefellers or the Vanderbilts, you can give them a call at Stonebridge Wealth Systems, 866-295-5146. You can stop by the offices in Kearney, Lincoln, Grand Island, and Omaha. Schedule a one-on-one meeting with the team, 866-295-5146. You can always visit stonebridgeiwm.com and get a complimentary written review. We'll be back with more on the Retirement Compass Radio Show.
Hi, I'm Jeremy Gove with Stonebridge Wealth Systems. Are you taking too much risk with your retirement or not enough? Most people really aren't sure. That's why we created the Stonebridge Risk Quiz. In just a few minutes, it helps you discover your personal risk tolerance. Your score could reveal why your investments sometimes feel too aggressive or maybe too conservative. It's quick, simple, and eye-opening. Scan the QR code or visit stonebridgeriskquiz.com to see if your money matches your mindset.
Thanks Thanks so much for listening to the Retirement Compass radio show. I'm Mike Bauer, and happy to be joined by the co-founders of Stonebridge Wealth Systems, Tim Kulhanek and Jeff Gove, both financial advisors as well. And they're serving families all over Nebraska, in Omaha, Grand Island, Lincoln, and Kearney. That's where the offices are located, but you can always find them online at stonebridgeiwm.com. And, you know, for many of the farm families listening, for the ag families that you work with, Jeff, I'm sure there's a question that keeps a lot of them up at night, which is, how do they treat their kids fairly when one of them's out there every single day running the operation, and the others, they built their lives somewhere else? They've moved on, you know, maybe they went to college and they got a job, you know, halfway across the country. So how do you approach when a family says, hey, we've got an off-farm heir dilemma, if you will, that I got somebody here, blood, sweat, and tears going into the farm, but also I love my other, you know, child that is living halfway across the country?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, the first step is just having the conversation. You know, by not having the conversation, you're going to create a mess. You know, I mean, it's not something that is fun to think about, you know, the day that you're gone, and now it's going to be distributed however you determined. Hopefully you determined. I think Tim or Zach had an example over the last few weeks of a family that didn't have a plan at all. The good news is the state of Nebraska has a plan for you. You might not like what that plan looks like, but for your specific question, you know, you've got one kid on the farm that's still farming or helping out, and maybe other kids that have moved away that aren't involved at all in the farm. That's a challenge. You know, we want to keep things fair, but fair isn't always equal, right? We don't have to leave, you know, if you have 3 kids, it doesn't have to be in thirds. Or if you want it to be the value to be in thirds, it's where we just talked about life insurance, where that could be a great tool to try to equalize the estate. So to the one that's farming, you leave farm ground and maybe some liquidity to pay some expenses. And then the other 2, you leave death benefit or the ability for the one that's farming, giving them the ability to buy their siblings out. Sometimes that child that would be farming would buy life insurance on mom and dad. So then when you pass away, they have cash to go buy them. There's a lot of different options, and everybody's case is different. You know, if you have health issues, life insurance probably or maybe isn't an option. It might still be, so it might still be worth exploring. But life insurance is a great wealth transfer tool, and it's a tool that's very good at solving this type of a problem.
You know, Tim, Jeff just mentioned it. Life insurance as a wealth transfer tool helps solve this problem because obviously land is illiquid. It's not, you know, off-farm siblings can, you know, potentially inherit an asset they can't use if they're living halfway across the country. And the first thing he said, though, is have a conversation. So when looking at this, I'm sure that this is a place, Tim, where relationships can take real damage, but not necessarily because agreed, but because there wasn't a plan in the first place.
It's true. And like the thing of it is, like I've got family that's going through this right now, and it's tough because, yeah, they might live 4 hours away, 6 hours away, and not really have a connection to the farm. And what I tell people is there's 3 reasons why people are motivated to do about anything, because they love somebody, something, or what the thing can do for them. And as future generations, if you want to keep this land in the family, but you want to be fair, so you're leaving, you know, land to all of the different heirs, even the ones that aren't connected to the farm at all. Well, the somebody, when you die, the somebody's gone. The something they don't have a connection to, but I promise you they know what it can do for them financially. So you have to really think through this. You can't just say everybody gets an equal share and all of a sudden, you know, you're gone and there wasn't any communication. It can be a real mess. I know we're out of time, but this is something that we work with on a regular basis. I really encourage folks who are going through this, or this is coming down around the bend at some point in time, give our office a call today.
And you can do that at 866-295-5146. That's 866-295-5146. Schedule a visit with the team at Stonebridge Wealth Systems. Leave your checkbook at home. You give them a call. You're going to have a conversation and start that plan today. You can also go online to stonebridgeiwm.com.
Hi, I'm Tim Kulhanek with Stonebridge Wealth Systems. You've worked hard and saved for retirement, but how much of it will you actually get to keep? If your savings are in a traditional IRA or 401k, Uncle Sam has a claim on every withdrawal you make. And with tax rates expected to rise in the future, the cost of waiting could be significant. A Roth conversion may help lower your future tax burden. Want to know what your liability could look like? Scan the QR code or visit StonebridgeRothQuiz.com to take our Roth conversion quiz today and see if a conversion makes sense for you.
Hey, thanks so much for listening to the Retirement Compass Radio Show. I'm Mike Bauer, and joined today by Jeff Gove and Tim Kulhanek, co-founders and financial advisors of Stonebridge Wealth Systems. You can catch them all over Nebraska, Kearney, Lincoln, Grand Island, and Omaha, and of course online at StonebridgeIWM.com. That's StonebridgeIWM.com. And gentlemen, this segment, I want to talk about the fact that wills, trust, there's maybe a lot of confusion there for folks, because most people assume that if they've got a will, there you go, I'm good. My money's going to go exactly where I want it to go. But I think, and you guys will be able to educate me and our listeners here, that assumption is wrong. Am I right in thinking that that's wrong, Jeff, if that makes any sense at all?
Yeah, I think, if you have beneficiaries, hopefully you have beneficiaries named on your accounts. You should. If you have a 401k, an IRA, a Roth IRA, even your bank accounts, you can list beneficiaries. It doesn't matter if you have beneficiaries listed on the account. It doesn't matter what your will says. So, some kind of, I guess, hard examples or, not great stories. There was one, I think it was in New York, and it's probably happened hundreds or thousands of times, but a couple that was married, he had a life insurance policy. Let's say it was $1 million, and they got divorced. Well, he updated his will to his sister because they didn't have any children, but he did not update his beneficiary form on his life insurance.
Okay.
So he passes away. That money goes to his ex-wife because that's who is the named beneficiary. That is a massive mistake, obviously. So it doesn't matter what your will says or your trust says or any of that stuff. If you have beneficiaries on your accounts, you update your will, you need to update your beneficiary forms as well.
I got a quick question.
Yeah.
Did you ask the ex-wife if she thought it was a massive mistake?
That's true. It's all about perspective.
I'm sure she was enjoying that. Tim, when we talk about beneficiary designations, how does that process go? Because is it as easy as checking a box? I mean, I know I've gone through when my daughter was born. I updated some stuff. I went through the online portals, but just having having the presence of mind to know that that's something that you've got to do. It sounds like it can be an easy thing to do where you don't have to involve lawyers and estate and trust and all that stuff.
Yeah, it's free. It's the cheapest way to do it, both now and later. Like, there's some things with estate planning that they're cheaper to set up, more expensive to use. Some are more expensive to set up, but they're cheaper to use. Like in the state of Nebraska, there's like 5 things that probably, not specific advice, there's like 5 things when somebody passes away that an attorney's going to have to do to help you settle the estate, right? And if you have a will, there's 5, and if you have a trust, maybe there's a couple less, but 1 or 2 less. But there's 5, let's say 3 to 5 main things that are going to have to happen. They'll open the estate account, and then they're going to have to close it on the other end. And then in the middle are some different things with accounting and inventorying different assets, because we have an inheritance tax here in Nebraska. But that's going to happen whether you have a will or a trust. So, when we talk about, is this a set it and forget it type thing? The biggest reason it's not is because the rules of the game change, and you don't have any say over that. The government has the say, and they get a vote every year, not just on taxes, but it also applies to estate planning. So, for example, let's say you use Jeff's example, and you're like, oh, well, no, that guy, that's good advice, but I went ahead and updated my beneficiaries. And I made the beneficiaries of my, 401k and my IRAs and all my accounts, retirement accounts, non-retirement accounts, everything. It all goes to fill in the blank, a trust, whatever it might be. Like, all of a sudden you have this potential conflict because the government changed the rules in 2019, and they said, hey, like IRAs, they don't get that like lifetime distribution anymore. When somebody dies, for most people, you get 10 years and you have to have it cashed out. Well, let's say that you have a trust that you set up back in 2012. and you feel like you have a vulnerable beneficiary and you don't want them, it's maybe a spendthrift type of issue where you're worried they're just going to blow all the money. So what does Ed Slott say? He's like, why do you need to trust? Because you don't trust, So we don't trust this person because they're going to blow all the money. So we say that, hey, they can get the income from the trust, but nothing more unless the trustee, who is somebody I do feel is responsible, deems it, a necessary and reasonable distribution to send this additional amount for something like their health, education, or some sort of maintenance and support type of need. Okay, so they get the income. So it's what we call a conduit trust. The income flows in, it goes out because we don't want to pay taxes at trust tax rates because we know those are atrocious. Most people think, oh, trust, that means I'm saving taxes. Think again, right? As Lee Corso would say, what would he say?
Not so fast, my friend.
Thank you. So we've got this trust that we set up in 2012. We think, I already did my estate plan, Tim. I'm going to tune you out. I'm going to go to Yacht Rock here. And they probably already did that, so I'm a little late, right? It's late in the show. They're listening to Yacht Rock, the people that should be listening to me, because they already did their trust 14 years ago. The problem is the rules change, and their trust is now effectively outdated because the Secure Act, in large part, decimated trust planning when it comes to these retirement accounts. And because at the end of 10 years, there's a massive RMD, when they die at the end of the 10 years, this vulnerable person, right, that they thought they were doing the Hippocratic oath of finance by, first doing no harm by putting this gob of money in their lap. At the end of 10 years, if it's a conduit trust that says all income gets paid out, what happens at the end of 10 years of that, let's say, $1 million IRA, Jeff?
What's left?
What happens at the end of the 10 years?
It's paid out, and you get a tax on it.
Right? It's income. And the trust says income gets paid out. So this person who's terrible with money, who's at Warhorse right now, gets $1 million, right? And that's the end of it. Okay, that's where it stops. It's not going to grandkids. It's not going to the next generation. It's not going to be used for education. It's going to be blown somewhere. And that's why estate planning is not a product you buy. It's a process that you engage with that has to change because life's dynamic, so your plan has to be as well.
And you mentioned estate planning. It's not a product you buy. You guys have put together. It's not a product necessarily, but it's a great tool for anyone listening. At StonebridgeLegacy.net, you've put together a really quick legacy and estate planning readiness quiz. For anybody listening, go to StonebridgeLegacy.net. It'll just take you a couple minutes and find out really how ready you are for this process. And honestly, for anybody just tuning in, the key point in this segment is that your will, and Jeff, you right off the bat, you outline this, your will doesn't control your IRA, your 401k, your life insurance. Your beneficiary form does. If you're listening right now and you're not sure what's on file, if that example that Jeff threw out there of, in New York, somebody still had their ex-wife on as the beneficiary, but they had updated their will, man, if you're not sure if you have that situation as well, that's a quick, important thing, and Stonebridge Wealth Systems can help you check that out. 866-295-5146. That's 866-295-5146. Or again, the StonebridgeLegacy.net estate planning readiness quiz is a great resource for you. So let's talk taxes here, Jeff. In terms of updating beneficiary forms and with the estate, how does this all connect to the tax picture with potential financial consequences beyond just where the money goes?
I guess one thing that comes to mind specifically is, we have a lot of people that are charitably inclined. So you're going to leave some money to whatever charity, your church, Faith Christian School in Kearney, whatever it is, it doesn't matter. It's 501c3. So when you pass away, money goes to them. You have to make sure you leave the right money. So some people would say, well, I want 25% to go to that charity, and I'm doing that out of my bank account. If you have an IRA, your kid, if you have children or any other person that's going to inherit it, they're going to pay income tax on that. Tim broke that out. They have 10 years essentially to take that money out, and they're going to pay income tax on it. I met with somebody just earlier this week that they're taking out 10% of their portfolio every year. But how has the market done the last few years? It's done really well. So that account is actually growing. They're taking out 10%, which in 10 years that should cover it, but it's not because that account is still growing. So that tax time bomb is growing and growing and growing. We get to that 10th year, whatever's left in there is going to be paid out. So Instead, if you're leaving money to charity, leave that money to the charity. They get it out tax-free, right? So the Roth IRA, the brokerage account, that goes to your kids. The IRA money is going to go to the charity. We have some people that are buying life insurance to leave to charity. There's no reason to do that. Buy the life insurance, leave that to your kids, take the IRA, give that to the charity.
Yeah, and you don't want to be making, mistakes like that. Absolutely. The team at Stonebridge Wealth Systems can help you avoid those pitfalls. So, Tim, one thing that listeners, chiming in right now, if they want to do a little homework this week, what would you want them to do this week after hearing the segment talking about specifically the beneficiary blind spot?
Yeah, it's easy. Check your beneficiary forms. I've met with a lot of people, and when we do estate planning work, and which is what we coordinate. I don't draft your documents. We coordinate them. I can't tell you how often people don't know, one, what Jeff said. They don't know that their beneficiary forms are actually going to govern where the money goes, not their will or their trust. They're totally blindsided by that.
Yeah.
So check your beneficiary forms, find out what they say. If you can't find it, or you're relying on the custodian, the firm that the money is held at, that's a mistake. You've got to just draft. All you have to do is draft a new one. Okay. If you can't find the old one, that's fine. Just draft a new one, sign it, date it as of today, and that way your wishes are on file. And again, don't rely on the company. You should keep a copy for yourself so you know what the actual beneficiaries are. Keep that with your state documents. That's the best advice I can give you for now.
I mean, for anybody just tuning in, the beneficiary designation form carries a lot more weight than your will in many cases. And if you're not sure whether you've got it all updated currently on file for your accounts, that's exactly why it's worth giving the team at Stonebridge Wealth Systems a call. 866-295-5146. That's 866-295-5146. You can always go online, and honestly, the resource for the estate and estate planning and readiness quiz at stonebridgelegacy.net is a great place to start. Just a couple minutes of your time, and you're going to find out where you stand. Again, that is stonebridgelegacy.net. We'll be back with more on the Retirement Compass radio show.
Hi, I'm Jeremy Gove with Stonebridge Wealth Systems. Are you taking too much risk with your retirement or not enough? Most people really aren't sure. That's why we created the Stonebridge Risk Quiz. In just a few minutes, it helps you discover your personal risk tolerance. Your score could reveal why your investments sometimes feel too aggressive or maybe too conservative. It's quick, simple, and eye-opening. Scan the QR code or visit stonebridgeriskquiz.com to see if your money matches your mindset.
Hey, thanks so much for listening to the Retirement Compass radio show. We do this show for you all throughout the course of Nebraska. If you're in Kearney, Lincoln, Grand Island, or Omaha, Stonebridge Wealth Systems is right next door. Wherever you are in Nebraska, though, Stonebridge IWM is just a click away. That's stonebridgeiwm.com. I'm Mike Bauer, joined today by Jeff Gove and Tim Kulhanek, co-founders and financial advisors with Stonebridge Wealth Systems. And okay, we're going to get a little weird here, but there's some lessons to be learned. Every so often we talk about athletes, well-known figures, Michael Jackson, Prince. They had massive fortunes that went in the wrong direction in a variety of different ways. But today let's talk about a name that I'm sure will elicit a reaction to everyone listening, O.J. Simpson. Will build his resume as a Hall of Fame running back. He was an acclaimed actor. He was all over commercials, getting you to buy rent cars. And also, did some jail time, a highly publicized criminal trial. But aside from the criminal trial, Jeff, he was also he was found not guilty in criminal, but in civil court was found guilty of a massive civil judgment. He actually never paid it. He passed away years ago. The debt's still unresolved. There's a lot of drama. There's documentaries, there's movies. But for somebody like OJ with an unbelievable amount of wealth at one point in time and every resource available, money, lawyers, advisors, he still ends up financially destroyed aside from, legal stuff and going to jail. But what jumps out at you first from OJ's story from a financial perspective, not a moral one?
Yeah, and it's not just OJ. What jumps out to me is when we do our estate planning workshop, we put a kind of a board of all of these famous, really wealthy people, and ask what do they have in common, and they're all deceased. And all of them died intestate, meaning, like you said, OJ, he had all the resources in the world. Like he could hire the attorneys. He had the best attorneys, and that's how he got off on murder, probably. He had tax people, all of these different people. Same with all these people that we put up on the board. They all had people like Prince. You know, they all had all of the resources, all of the people, all of the money that they could afford to pay. But those people specifically, they didn't even have a will, you know? So one of the most basic financial documents that really everyone should have, they didn't have. So it doesn't matter how much money you have. You still have the resources to get some of these things done, and you still need these things done. So, you know, the zeros are just, you know, there's more zeros for some of these other people, but it doesn't make it less important for, you know, the everyday person to get some of this stuff done. The other thing, just kind of reading the notes here. So his civil judgment was $33.5 million. And like you said, he didn't pay it. So that accrued interest. So it was a much, much bigger. Like it says there's $100 million by the time he passed away. So, and I'm sure they're hitting up his estate for that. So yeah, taking care of some of those obligations, credit cards. You know, I met with a gal yesterday who's got, you know, 20,000 plus in credit cards, and you're paying over 20% probably in interest on that. So getting that stuff knocked out, not pushing some of these financial decisions to the future because the cost compounds by not planning for your retirement and having less time to prepare. You know, there might be simple things that you can do to be better prepared that you could do today, but by putting them off could have less of an impact. So lots of reasons to get a plan done today.
You know, for anybody just joining us, it's kind of a weird conversation, but we're talking about OJ's financial story as a cautionary tale, not for the salacious headlines, but what we can actually learn about ignoring problems, maybe relying on one income source. And as you mentioned, Jeff, you know, hey, you've got all the resources, but not having the right structures in place. You know, you mentioned Prince. Prince passed away in 2016 without an estate plan. It took years to divide it up among his siblings. I mean, more recently, the Black Panther, Tim, Chadwick Boseman died without a will in 2020. And he ends up going into, you know, that estate goes into probate, and years of legal battles are fought there. For anybody who wants to make sure that you're avoiding that kind of quagmire, you can give the team at Stonebridge Wealth Systems a call. They'll help you figure things out at 866-295-5146. That's 866-295-5146. You can go online to stonebridgeiwm.com. So, Tim, with OJ, that civil, you know, it goes from 33 to over 100, but obviously the judgment didn't sit still. It accrued in interest here. How often do you see that dynamic? As Jeff used the example of, you know, somebody here has credit card debt at 20,000. That's a little bit more relatable than, you know, OJ and legal battles.
Yeah, and it is. I think there's a few things to take into consideration here. One, it ties back to our segment on estate planning, because there, like Jeff mentioned, there's all these famous folks who just had a mess of an estate. James Caan, a few years ago when he died, he had all these highfalutin financial advisors, but unfortunately there's a difference between like a financial product salesperson and a financial planner, right? We focus on holistic planning at Stonebridge, and what a lot of these people end up, you know, doing, or the people they're working with, just sell them a bunch of crap that doesn't do them any good. And so he had a complete mess. James Caan, if you remember him from Elf, right? I loved him as an actor. I think he was phenomenal. But his estate was a mess. Howard Hughes. You guys remember Howard Hughes?
Mostly from the movie, but yes.
Yeah. So when I show his picture, I'll say, anybody know who this is? And a lot of people, he was pretty secretive, so a lot of people don't know who he was. But this guy named Melvin Dummer, or Dumar, forged a will. So Hughes died in 1976. Dummer emerged with a handwritten will alleging that he once picked up a disheveled hitchhiker in the Nevada desert who told him he was Howard Hughes, and the will designated a large portion, like 100-some million, because Howard Hughes was worth like $2.5 billion when he died in 1976. He'd be worth, just adjusted for inflation, $55 billion today. He'd probably one of the wealthiest people on earth if he was still alive today. So he, without a doubt, would be one of the wealthiest people on earth. But They called it the Mormon will because a large part of the state went to him and the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. However, a Las Vegas jury ruled the document was forged because, of course, it was. They wanted to leave him $156 million. Well, maybe if Howard would have been a little bit more proactive, he's busy making all this money and creating all this wealth, but he didn't have a will. So this guy had a fake will and, tried scamming him, and all of a sudden you get tied up in court and there's litigation and that costs a lot of money. So it all is everything's interconnected here. Now, to your question on okay, it's not 33 million, but this credit card debt, it does happen oftentimes. But what I've found is there's a lot of people out there. There's people listening to this right now who have avoided coming in because they're worried that they might come in and get news that they don't really want to hear. They might get bad news. They might be told hey, you can't afford to retire. You got to keep working. They feel ashamed, or they feel some amount of guilt for the lack of financial preparedness that they have. They feel overwhelmed because they don't know where to begin and they don't understand this stuff. And so instead of doing anything about it, they avoid the pain because that's what our bodies are trained to do. Our minds will do a lot more to avoid pain than to seek pleasure. And unfortunately, it makes our job a little bit more difficult because when they do finally come in, there's less time. Our time horizon has been compressed. But the good news is this. When folks come in, Jeff, I don't know if you'd agree with this or not, oftentimes we find out they're in a lot better shape than what they possibly could have thought that they were. And a lot of times we find some crazy things. I just met with some folks the other day where they came in and they're like, yeah, we've been helping our kids so much. And, we'd like to get out from underneath these Parent Plus loans. But my gosh, kids just can't decide what they want to do. And we've been very generous and we want to continue to do some stuff. But, he's still working 70, 80-hour weeks and just grinding his fingers to the bone. He's 75 years old. And I'm like, wait a minute, can I just put my Caleb Hammer hat on for a second and just be frank with you? What are you talking about? You're still helping, you guys are 70 and you're helping your kids $6,000, $7,000, $8,000 a year. At some point in time, Bank of Mom and Dad has to close. Well, let me see what you actually have here. Let me take a look at these things. And I find out this is crazy that not only is there plenty of assets there for them to probably retire right now, but they have pensions. They have true pensions, defined benefit plans that they didn't know that they had. We're talking about people that they're in their 70s now or late 60s, and when they were 65, that was the normal retirement age on these pensions. They don't really go up much after that, right? If at all. And they could have been drawing on them. They could have been retired, but because they were afraid of what they might hear, they put off ever coming in. Well, thank God. Now they're in. Now we can have this conversation. I can say, guys, you're going to get $1,500 a month for the rest of your lives between your two pensions. Now, I get that $1,500 a month doesn't pay all your bills, but they also get Social Security. And you throw that on top, and all of a sudden, maybe 60 to 70% of their expenses, pre-retirement expenses, are covered from fixed income. And we only need to fill up the next 30% or so from the retirement assets, which is a lot lighter lift than thinking that, hey, I've got to come up with an extra 18 to 20,000 per year for the rest of my life. That's why I encourage folks to dial the number that Mike's going to give you to come in, because you don't know what you don't know. And a lot of times we have this instinctive negative thinking because it's a lot easier to control people by telling them bad news than good news. So when I'm saying, hey, you might be a lot better off than you think you are, a lot of people's brains are telling them, he's just trying to get me to come in there. I am 100% trying to get you to come in here. If you don't want, or don't need what we have to offer, you can walk out the door and you can unlock it before you get to it. But we would always do it for everybody. My point is, the worst thing that can happen is you're going to find out that, hey, maybe I'm in a lot better position than I was, or I get a reality check. And sometimes we just need a reality check. But I feel like you're doing yourself a disservice by not finding out the truth of the matter and just putting it off because you think putting it off means it's not real. It's still there, whether you're willing to face it or not.
I mean, I think that's a great point in terms of the fact that, we're just biologically we're trained to avoid pain and rather than pursue pleasure. But I think, hey, look, if you're out there and you're afraid of the bad news now is way better than bad news later when it compounds and it snowballs, and that effect is much more dramatic than had you addressed it now. And you mentioned the phone number 866 866-295-5146. That is 866-295-5146. You can always go online, stonebridgeiwm.com. Schedule a complimentary review. As Tim said, it doesn't cost you anything. You could walk right out the door. You could walk in the door, looking for some clarity, and whether you receive confirmation that what you've got going on works out, or maybe you actually walk out with confidence that, hey, you know what? I thought I was going to get bad news, and we're in a much better place than we thought we were. Give the team at Stonebridge Wealth Systems a call. Have that conversation now. Don't be fearful of the bad news potentially, because you know what? It could be really good news when you sit down and meet with the team. 866-295-5146. StonebridgeIWM.com is the website as well. That's our show of today. Tim, Jeff, always great to catch up with you. Always learn a little something, even if we start weird talking about OJ and end up with some really good life lessons. Once again, for anybody listening, a complimentary written review available for you at 866-295-5146 or StonebridgeIWM.com. We'll see you next week on the Retirement Compass Radio Show.